There is a version of ParkJimin that exists right now, today, sitting inside a streaming library most of you will never open. Not because it's rare in the way old fancams are rare, not because it got deleted or scrubbed by a company trying to protect an image, but because it was built, from the very beginning, to stay just out of reach. It's sitting behind a paywall that belongs to a Japanese telecom company, wrapped inside an app most army outside Japan have never heard of, and unless you're paying a monthly subscription to a platform called Lemino, or you happen to be on a very specific NTT Docomo phone plan, you're simply not the intended audience. And that's exactly why we need to talk about it. If you've been following the Docomo Max with BTS campaign at all, you already know the surface story. BTS became the face of one of Japan's biggest mobile carriers, a partnership that started rolling out back in February 2026, when Docomo first announced it was hosting nearly 30 BTS titles exclusively on Lemino, everything from live concert footage to variety specials, positioned as a value add for subscribers well before the commercial itself even aired. That early move mattered because it told you this was never meant to be a quick, one-off endorsement deal. It was infrastructure, a company laying the groundwork for a long-term content relationship months before the actual television spot went live. Then came the commercial itself, a television spot that aired across the country, and a promise of exclusive content to go along with it. But what a lot of people missed, especially outside Japan, is how deep that exclusivity actually goes. This isn't just a commercial with a behind-the-scenes reel bolted on for marketing points. Docomo built an entire content ecosystem around it, live performances, variety specials, a whole archive locked into Lemino, all positioned as premium value for subscribers. And buried inside that ecosystem is something ARMY have been quietly obsessing over for weeks. Solo behind-the-scenes footage, one video per member, following each of them individually through the process of shooting that commercial. Jimin has his own episode, and if you're not paying for Lemino, you don't get to see it. Before we go further, if this is the kind of thing you want to keep tabs on, now is the moment to hit subscribe, because content like this surfaces in fragments, a few seconds here, a translated clip there, and if you're not already following, you will miss the moment it actually breaks. So let's talk about what we do know, because even without the full footage in front of us, the shape of the story tells you something real about where Jimin sits right now in the industry. The commercial itself, nicknamed Always Together, shows the full group together, going through what's described as a genuinely relaxed shoot, members catching up with each other between takes, laughing, falling into easy conversation the way people do when they've spent over a decade sharing the same rooms, the same stages, the same exhaustion and the same triumphs. That's the version everyone got to see when the ad started airing. But the making of material, the version tucked inside Lemino's premium tier, goes somewhere the commercial itself never could. It's not polished the way a 30-second spot is polished. It shows the run-throughs before the cameras were rolling for real, the quiet in-between moments during still photography, and, in a detail that genuinely surprised a lot of people who managed to catch pieces of it, scenes captured through audio alone, no picture, just the sound of the room while the group worked. That's an unusual choice for a brand to make. Most companies want you looking at something shiny at all times. Docomo, or whoever shaped this content strategy, clearly understood that with a group like BTS, sometimes the most compelling thing you can offer isn't a visual at all, it's proximity. It's the feeling of being in the room, even when there's nothing to look at. And that's really the heart of why this matters for someone like Jimin specifically. Anyone who has watched his career over the last several months knows he spent this year becoming something the group has rarely had before, a genuinely elastic global figure who moves seamlessly between massive stadium stages and the front row of a Dior show in Paris, between a world tour stop in Munich, and a spot as the face of a national telecom brand's biggest ad push of the year. That kind of range doesn't happen by accident. It happens because brands and platforms have figured out that putting Jimin in front of a camera, in almost any context, tends to produce something people want to watch closely, and rewatch, and dissect frame by frame. Docomo clearly bet on that instinct when they decided a solo cut of the behind-the-scenes material was worth producing for all 7 members individually, releasing them as their own dedicated episodes starting on July 7th, rather than just letting the group version stand on its own. Think about what that decision actually costs a company like Docomo. Producing one group behind-the-scenes video is straightforward. You cut the best group moments, you release it once, you move on. Producing 7 additional solo cuts means 7 separate editing timelines, 7 separate release dates, 7 separate marketing pushes, all built around the idea that each individual member carries enough weight on his own to justify the extra work. That's not a decision a telecom company makes lightly, and it's not a decision they make for an act they consider a safe, generic celebrity endorsement. It's the kind of decision that gets made when the data already tells you that fans don't just want to see BTS, they want to see Jimin specifically, and Jungkook specifically, and RM specifically, each treated as their own draw. If you've ever wondered what it actually looks like when a brand quietly acknowledges how individualized this fandom really is, this is it, laid out in 7 separate release dates on a content calendar. If you've made it this far, drop a comment telling me whether you'd actually pay for a Lemino subscription just to see this, because the honest answer from a lot of ARMY seems to be yes, and that tells its own story about what this kind of exclusivity is actually worth. Here's where the tension really sits, though, and it's worth sitting with it honestly instead of pretending it isn't there. For years, the assumption baked into how BTS content spreads has been that eventually, everything surfaces. Fancams get uploaded, broadcasts get clipped and subtitled, and passed hand-to-hand across time zones within hours. Even heavily regionalized content, things aimed squarely at a domestic Korean or Japanese audience, usually finds its way into the wider fandom ecosystem eventually, whether through official channels catching up or through the tireless work of fan translators and clip accounts working in the background. This is different in a subtle but important way. Lemino isn't a broadcast you can screen record off a television. It's a subscription service gated behind a login, tied to a Japanese phone plan in a lot of cases, built specifically so that the content inside stays inside unless someone is willing to actively work to get it out. What that means practically is that the version of this footage most global ARMY will ever see isn't going to be the full 7, 8, 9-minute solo episode. It's going to be secondhand, a screen recording someone captured and uploaded before it got taken down. A translated excerpt shared by an account willing to do that thankless work. A few captioned seconds circulating on social media, stripped of context, presented without the full arc of whatever the original video actually built toward. And if you think that sounds frustrating, you're right, it is, but it's also exactly the kind of scarcity that turns a normal piece of brand content into something people are still talking about weeks later. Make sure you're subscribed if you want to catch at the moment a translated clip actually surfaces, because these things move fast and disappear just as quickly once companies start issuing takedowns. There's a pattern here that's worth pulling apart a little further, because it says something about how the economics of fandom content have shifted. A decade ago, exclusivity mostly meant regional broadcast rights, a variety show airing only on a Korean network, a magazine interview printed only in Japanese, and the barrier was really just translation and patience. Someone would eventually clip it, someone would eventually subtitle it, and the content would find its way to the wider fandom on its own timeline. What Docomo has built with Lemino is a step beyond that. It's not just regional, it's transactional, tied to an active subscription or a specific phone plan, which means the barrier isn't just language or geography anymore, it's a recurring monthly payment. That's a meaningfully different kind of wall, and it changes the incentive structure for everyone involved. For Docomo, it means every month someone keeps their Lemino premium subscription active partly to keep access to BTS content is a month of recurring revenue directly attributable to this partnership. For fans, it means the choice isn't simply wait and it'll surface. It's actively decide whether this specific piece of content is worth paying for or worth hoping someone else pays for and shares. What we can say with real confidence, based on how Docomo has described the footage and how similar behind-the-scenes material from this group has looked in the past, is that the emotional core of it is going to live in the contrast the company itself has already pointed to. There's a version of Jimin the camera's catch mid-take, locked in, focused, doing the specific kind of quiet concentration that comes from someone who has spent his entire adult life being extremely good at performing for an audience, even when the audience is just a small production crew and a camera operator. And then there's the version that appears the instant someone off camera calls cut, the shift in his posture, the change in his face, the return to whatever he actually feels like when nobody is asking him to be anything in particular. That kind of before and after is exactly the material that made, in the SOOP, and Bon Voyage, and every other loosely structured BTS variety show so beloved in the first place. It's not the choreography or the polish that keeps people coming back. It's the split second where the performance drops and something more ordinary, more human, slips through. There's also something worth noting about the timing of all of this, because context tends to matter more than people give it credit for. This solo footage started rolling out in July, right in the middle of a period where Jimin has been almost constantly visible, first through the Arirang World Tour's European leg, stops in Brussels and London, and then 2 consecutive sold-out nights in Munich that made BTS the first Asian act to pull off that particular feat at Allianz Arena, and now through this Docomo release landing practically on top of it. That's not a coincidence. That's a company understanding exactly when public attention on a specific member is going to be highest, and timing a premium content drop to catch as much of that wave as possible. It's smart. It's also exactly the kind of thing that makes it worth paying attention to what gets released next, because if this pattern holds, we should expect similar drops timed around future tour moments too. If you want to be first to know when the next one lands, this is your sign to subscribe and turn on notifications, because these platform-exclusive drops don't usually get announced loudly in advance, they just appear, and the accounts that catch them first are the ones already watching. It's also worth being honest about what this whole situation says about where BTS sits in the market right now, months removed from the group's full return from military service, and midway through their biggest world tour push since reuniting. A telecom company doesn't build an entire tiered content strategy, live shows, variety archives, exclusive making of footage split into 7 individual episodes, around an act whose commercial value they consider uncertain. This is the kind of investment reserved for a guaranteed draw, something Docomo can point to internally and say, with confidence, that subscriptions will follow. And the decision to give each member their own individual cut, rather than relying purely on the group version, tells you the company understands something a lot of casual observers still underestimate, which is that BTS fandom doesn't function as one undifferentiated mass. People follow individual members with real specificity and real intensity, and Jimin's individual pull is significant enough on its own that it made sense to produce, edit, and release a dedicated episode just for him rather than letting his moments get buried inside a 7-person group cut. It also fits a broader pattern in how Jimin's individual brand presence has been built this year, separate from but running alongside the group's activities. He's shown up at Dior Men's Fashion Week in Paris as a guest, he's been part of tour moments that go viral almost the same day they happen, and now he's anchoring part of a national telecom campaign in one of BTS's most important overseas markets. Each of those on their own is a normal thing for a member of a group this size to do. Stacked together across a single year, they start to sketch out something more deliberate, a version of Jimin being positioned less as 1/7 of a group and more as an individual brand asset that companies are willing to build entire content strategies around. That's not a small shift, and it's one worth watching closely if you care about where his career goes from here, both inside BTS and beyond it. So where does that leave us, sitting here without the actual footage in hand? Honestly, in a pretty good position, because the story isn't really about 6 or 7 minutes of commercial behind-the-scenes content. It's about what the existence of this footage, and the deliberate difficulty of accessing it, tells you about how valuable this specific era of Jimin's career has become to the people spending money to be associated with him. Whether the actual clips leak out fully translated within days, or whether they stay locked up tighter than usual because Docomo is watching more closely than most companies do, either way it's worth keeping an eye on. And if you've been enjoying this kind of deep dive into what's happening with Jimin right now, across the tour, across the brand deals, across everything, the best thing you can do is stay subscribed, because this is exactly the kind of story that develops in real time, and you don't want to be catching up 2 weeks late once everyone else has already seen the clip you've been waiting for. That's the moment. It exists. It's real, it's dated, it's confirmed by the company itself. The only question left is how long it stays behind that wall, and who gets to it first once it doesn't. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment with what you'd want to see most if that footage ever does make its way out, because whatever happens next, you'll want to already be here when it does.